You open your eyes before the alarm goes off. Not because you're rested. Because anxiety beat the alarm to it. You stare at the ceiling for exactly 4 seconds before your hand moves automatically toward your phone, checking emails you received while you were unconscious, from people who were also supposed to be unconscious. You have 17 notifications. None of them are emergencies. All of them feel like emergencies. You haven't been awake for 90 seconds and you're already exhausted. And here's the part nobody talks about. This isn't modern stress. This isn't a bad week. This is every single morning for millions of people on this planet. And the most disturbing question you'll hear today is this: what if you were specifically, biologically, catastrophically built for something completely different? Let's go back. Not 100 years. Not 1,000. Let's go back 30,000 years to a hillside somewhere in what is now Central Europe. A man sits at the entrance of a shallow cave. He has no job title. He has no performance review scheduled for Thursday. Nobody has sent him a passive-aggressive message about his response time. He is watching a deer graze about 300 meters away, and he is doing it with the calm, focused attention of someone who has absolutely nowhere else to be. He's not lazy. He's not primitive. His brain is the same size as yours. His neurons fire at the same speed. He can solve complex problems, read social situations with terrifying accuracy, and remember the location of water sources across hundreds of square kilometers of landscape. The only difference between him and you is that nobody ever told him his time belonged to someone else. Here's something that will genuinely irritate you if you think about it for too long. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer communities, groups like the Hadza in Tanzania or the Piraha in the Amazon, consistently find the same pattern. Adults secure food and handle survival needs in roughly 15 to 20 hours per week. That's it. The rest of the time is theirs. Completely, unscheduled, gloriously theirs. The Hadza don't have a word for overworked because the concept never needed to exist. Meanwhile, you are working 40 to 60 hours a week, commuting on top of that, answering emails during dinner, and telling yourself you'll rest once things slow down. Things have not slowed down. Things will not slow down. You have been saying this since 2014. But let's talk about what they actually did with all that free time, because this is the part that completely destroys the idea that leisure is somehow a modern invention that we haven't earned yet. In 2003, researchers excavating a site in Blombos Cave, South Africa, found pieces of ochre, a reddish mineral, engraved with geometric patterns. These weren't accidental marks. These were deliberate, careful, repeated crosshatched lines that required patience, intention, and what can only be described as an artistic eye. They were 75,000 years old. 75,000. The Roman Empire wouldn't exist for another 73,000 years. And someone sat down, picked up a piece of rock, and decided to make something beautiful with their afternoon. Not for survival. Not for status. Just because the pattern in their head needed to exist somewhere outside of it. In 1994, a group of cavers in southern France squeezed through a narrow passage and found themselves standing in a gallery that hadn't been entered in 30,000 years. The walls were covered in paintings. Mammoths with shaggy fur rendered in confident sweeping lines. A pride of lions with individually distinct faces. A rhinoceros mid-charge, its horn tilted at exactly the angle you'd expect if you'd seen one run. These weren't doodles. Art historians who studied the Chauvet cave paintings noted the use of perspective techniques that European painters wouldn't formally develop for another 29,000 years. Someone lay on their back by firelight in a cold underground chamber for days and painted animals on stone with pigments they ground and mixed themselves. They weren't documenting a hunt. They weren't leaving instructions. They were making something that mattered to them, using time they had, because having time was simply the baseline condition of being human. Now here's where it gets genuinely funny in the saddest possible way. Modern wellness culture has spent the last decade trying to sell you back the things your ancestors had for free. There are apps that teach you to breathe correctly. There are expensive retreats where people pay thousands of dollars to sit in silence for a weekend. There are books, best-selling, award-winning books, explaining the health benefits of walking in nature. Your great-great-great-grandmother didn't need a book. She was in nature. She was nature. She didn't need a meditation app because her brain wasn't under a constant siege of notifications demanding her attention every 11 seconds. You are paying a subscription fee to approximate the mental state that was the default setting of every human who ever lived before roughly 1850. That's the joke. The joke is on all of us and it isn't particularly funny. Let's reconstruct what a genuinely human day looks like. You wake up naturally because your body knows how to do that when it isn't being chemically terrorized by cortisol and blue light. The morning is slow. Food is shared. Conversation happens not because you're networking but because you're genuinely interested in the people around you. Children run past being chaotic in the specific, wonderful way children are when adults aren't frantically scheduling them. Someone is working on something, sharpening a tool, repairing something, figuring out a better method, but they're doing it because competence feels good, not because someone is measuring their output. This is not a fantasy. This is the documented daily rhythm of every hunter-gatherer group anthropologists have ever studied in sufficient detail. It's not a utopia. People argued, got sick, faced real danger. But the structure of the day, its shape, its pace, its priorities, was profoundly different from the one you're currently living inside. The afternoon in that older world had a quality that modern life has almost entirely eliminated. Call it purposeless time. Time that didn't need to justify itself. People sat together and talked about nothing important. They watched their children play and actually watched, not watched while also answering messages. They napped, unapologetically, in the warm part of the afternoon, because their bodies asked for it and there was no cultural story yet that said rest was something you had to earn. Anthropologist David Graeber spent years arguing that a significant portion of modern work is, by the admission of the people doing it, essentially meaningless. He called them bullshit jobs. People managing spreadsheets that track other spreadsheets. People in meetings about meetings. Your ancestor on the hillside would not understand this. He would genuinely, with no irony whatsoever, be unable to understand why you are on a conference call at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday discussing the brand alignment of your company's new email signature. Then night came. And night was not dead time. It was perhaps the most human time of all. Around a fire, and humans have been gathering around fires for at least 1 million years, which means fire is older than our species and we evolved in its light. People told stories. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner recorded hundreds of hours of conversation among the Jews/Hoansi people of Botswana and found something remarkable. Daytime conversation was practical. Logistics, mild complaints, information sharing. But when the sun went down and the fire came up, 81% of conversation shifted to narrative. Stories about people who did extraordinary things. Stories about why the world is the way it is. Jokes that made everyone lose composure completely. This wasn't entertainment in the passive, screen-based sense you're used to. This was community construction. This was how values were transmitted, how identity was maintained, how people remembered who they were and what they believed and why any of it mattered. Sleep, when it came, didn't come all at once. Before electric light fundamentally rewired human circadian rhythm, people slept in 2 distinct phases. First sleep, roughly 4 hours after dark. Then a waking period of 1 to 2 hours, quiet, reflective, sometimes used for prayer or conversation or creative thought, and then second sleep until dawn. Historian Roger Ekirch spent 16 years researching pre-industrial sleep patterns and found references to this 2-phase sleep in hundreds of historical documents, legal records, medical texts, and personal diaries from medieval Europe. The hour between sleeps had a name. People wrote about it as a time of unusual clarity, when the mind moved differently, when problems untangled themselves, when dreams lingered and mixed with waking thought in interesting ways. You've probably experienced this and called it insomnia and panicked about it. It was, for most of human history, simply Tuesday night. 10,000 years ago, everything broke. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the slow grinding way that changes everything without anyone noticing until it's far too late. Agriculture began in the Fertile Crescent and spread outward, and the logic of it was simple and inescapable. Farming produces surplus. Surplus supports population growth. Population growth requires more farming. Once you're in the cycle, you cannot leave it because now there are 10,000 people where there used to be 100, and those 10,000 people cannot eat without the fields. The skeletal record from early agricultural populations is a document of decline. Shorter stature. Bone lesions indicating nutritional deficiency. Spinal damage from repetitive labor. Dramatically increased rates of infectious disease from living in close proximity to animals and large numbers of people. Early farmers worked more, ate less variety, got sicker, and died younger than the hunter-gatherers they replaced. They knew what they were giving up. They had no choice. What followed was the longest slow disaster in human history. Specialization. Hierarchy. The division of people into those whose time belonged to themselves and those whose time belonged to someone with more land, more weapons, or more gold. Slavery. Serfdom. Wage labor, which is serfdom wearing a business casual shirt. The idea, radical, strange, historically bizarre, that a human being's primary obligation is to be economically productive. That leisure is not the natural state of a living creature but a reward you receive for sufficient compliance. That you should feel guilty lying in a field on a Tuesday afternoon watching clouds move when there is technically work that could be done. You internalized this. Everyone around you internalized it. It is so thoroughly internalized that most people cannot take a 2-week vacation without checking their work email. Most people feel vaguely ashamed of napping. Most people need to justify rest by framing it as recovery for more productivity, rather than as simply the thing living creatures do because they are alive and alive things rest. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not failing to optimize correctly. You are a creature with 300,000 years of biological history being asked to function inside a system that has existed for roughly 10,000 years, and the system was designed, not maliciously but functionally, to extract maximum labor from you in exchange for minimum necessary resources. Your exhaustion is not a personal failing. It is an accurate biological response to genuinely abnormal conditions. Your longing for time, unscheduled, unjustified, purposeless time to simply exist and breathe and make something beautiful for no reason, is not laziness. It is the oldest, most human impulse you carry. It is your nervous system telling you something true about who you actually are underneath everything the modern world has layered on top of you. And that longing you feel, that quiet ache for a morning with nowhere to be? That isn't a dream of the future. That's the memory of what you once were. The question is whether you'll remember it loudly enough to do something about it.